Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. Welcome to the third part of the three-part series I created on painting miniatures with different styles. Today's technique is painting the miniature in very much of a grim dark technique. I'll step you through all the process to try and achieve a little more grimy look to your models. Let's get started. In our last video we painted a ultramarine very much in the classic method. There's nothing fancy done with this model, no washes or anything. Today we're going to expand on this. Painting our new model in the grimdark technique, we're going to start very much how we did with the previous model painting in the classical method. The major difference though is we won't be doing a white zenithal layer first because we really want to keep a dark tone to the model itself. So we'll start with a Cantor blue and paint all over the armor where the blue would normally be. As this is quite a lengthy process, I've clipped it a little bit today. As you can see, most of the armor now is currently painted. Now with our Cantor blue painted all over and the paint now dry across the models, we're ready to paint the eyes and the purity seal. We'll use Mephiston red again and we'll use our wet palette to just thin down the paint. We'll carefully put some paint in the eyes as we've done in the past. Try keep your hands quite steady, and then we'll also paint the purity seal on the arm. Now we need to paint some of the gold trimming around the shoulders and the aquila. We use an old cheap brush to get this done. As we've mentioned in the past, the gold paints and the silver paints can really damage your brush. So using a bit of retributor armor, we thin it down slightly and we'll paint the shoulder guard trimmings just a nice sort of even gold paint around the edges. Once you've done that, make sure that you get the emblem on the chest, the aquila on the chest and the aquila on the gun. With the gold done now around the shoulder guards and the chest, we can focus on some of the brown areas, the little back pouch and the belt on the ultramarine again. Now again we'll use Ronox brown, we'll thin it down with a little bit of water, and then we'll try and get the brown paint on all of the brown areas as best as you can. Take your time with this because it is right next to some of the other armor pieces, so just get it in the best you can, especially around the belt, around the front of the model. It can be a little bit tricky. With the brown now done, we can start looking at the silver areas on the model. So areas around the gun, the belt buckle. On the back of the model you'll see on the backpack there's some side little pieces that look like vents. Tend to paint them silver too. So we'll just use some lead belcher again. You can water it down a little bit. My particular pot had some water in it already, so I didn't water down too much, but if yours is thick, just add a little bit of water and get onto the silver areas and get the first coat on. Now that we've finished all of the base layer paints on the model, all the blues, silvers and golds, we can start looking at bringing some interest to the model. And by this I mean taking a few different layer paints and start building up the layers, building up the complexity to the colors on the model, so not just a single blue tone. So we're going to take a little bit of white layer paint and we're going to take some Cantor blue and mix it around a little bit, just a touch of white with some Cantor blue, just to create a slight lighter touch of Cantor blue. And what we're going to do is on the higher areas of the model, like the top of the shoulder pads or around the edges of the legs or the edging of all of the model pieces, we're looking to just touch a little bit of this lighter blue paint just to bring a little bit more interest. So think of how you would look at an object and how light affects an object at certain angles. We're trying to simulate that particular thing happening on your model. So anywhere that you see that light would potentially hit, that's where you want to add a little bit of more lighter paint. While we were doing the extra layering, I noticed I didn't paint the purity seal, so for that we just use a little bit of Wraithbone base paint that you can get from Citadel Paints. The image didn't come out very clear, but a bit of Wraithbone paint, thin it down with a little bit of water, and just paint the purity seal on the front and the back. It's just to bring the paper out a little bit, that it looks a little bit more like worn paper. Now with our model done and a little bit of highlighting done, we want to target some of the shaded areas, some of the recesses, some of the cracks of the model and the darker areas of the model. For that we want to use a shading brush that you can get from Games Workshop or Citadel Paints. It's a dedicated brush with quite a thick front part of the brush to soak up a lot of the Nuln oil that we'll use for the shading. You basically give that a shake. You can water it slightly down with some water if you like, and there are some recommendations to do that, but as I want to create quite a grimy effect on the model, I'm going to take straight out of the pot this time. You take the Nuln oil and you start putting it in all areas of the model, focusing in the recessed areas between the armor parts, the cracks and the little lines of where this Nuln oil can get in. You need to target the entire model top to bottom. The one thing to be careful though is don't let too much of the Nuln oil pool in areas of the armor area that are quite flat, otherwise you'll get a bit of a streaking effect that happens. Once you finish doing the shading on the model, let the Nuln oil dry, and then start to get a few edge highlights and a few highlights on the armor with the original base colors that we used, just to bring out some areas of the model's color. So a little bit of that Retributor gold on the shoulder pads and certain high areas really brings out a bit of color quite nicely. A bit of the Cantor blue mixed with some of the white on the upper reaches of the shoulder pads and the backpack and maybe above the knees, and the edge trimmings around the legs, so areas where natural light would potentially hit. You just want to add that accent of light. Once you've done your highlights, if you see some areas look too bright, don't be afraid to go back to your Nuln oil and just darken things down a little bit and just bring that color tone back down, and you can always lighten it up again if you need be. Once you're done with your initial blue highlights, have a look around the model for some of the areas you can touch up, like the red on the purity seal for instance. You can add a little bit more red to bring a bit more vibrant color. Another thing you can also do is use a lighter red, like a squig orange, and you can use that to particularly put on the edges of things like the purity seal, or what I like to also do is put a dot of the squig orange in the eye of the ultramarine, so you have a two-shade color of the eye. Another bit of edge highlighting can be done around the backpack. You can use a lighter brown layer paint and just put a little bit in your wet palette, water it down slightly, and use the side of your brush just to rub the paint on the edge of things like the backpack or the top of the belt to just give a little bit of a contrast of color from just the standard Rhinox brown. You can also mix a bit of white with Rhinox brown if you prefer to lighten things down, or any real light brown that you might have. You would also want to highlight some of the gold areas, and for that you can use Liberator Gold. Just water a little bit of Liberator Gold down and touch the high spots of the gold areas, especially on the shoulder pads and the corners, and maybe the top of the Aquila, on the chest piece and the gun. One of the last bits of edge highlighting will be around the gun. You can use a bit of Rune Fang silver, and you can just sort of touch the edges of the gun and the top of the gun's scope, and maybe on the back, on the grenade, on the back of the Space Marine. Also any particular areas where you think metal might be shining through and you want to get a bit of reflective surface. Overall, I quite like the grimdark method for my painting technique. Out of the three models, I've enjoyed painting this one the most. It has more detail, more character to the model. It is a lot more time consuming, and it does take a lot more effort to get it to a nice detail. But if you want something that really pops on the tabletop, this is usually the technique that I like to go with. If you enjoyed this video and you enjoyed the series, please think about hitting that subscribe button for me, leave a comment, click the like button, really helps with the YouTube algorithm.